Welcome today. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this JCRC webinar called Bringing Hadar Home. My name is Gideon Taylor. I serve as the Executive Vice President and CEO of the Jewish Community Relations Council of New York, and it's really my deep honor and privilege to be able to moderate today's program. So a few words about JCRC. We're the primary community relations agency for the New York Jewish community. We build relationships to advance the values, the interests, and security of the Jewish community, and to create a more interconnected New York for all. New York is obviously at the core of what we do and where we work, but close in our hearts is Israel. And today we shift to hear a heart-wrenching story of a young man named Hadar Goldin. So Hadar was 23 years old in 2014 when he fought in Operation Protective Edge as an IDF soldier against Hamas, which was raining down thousands of rockets on Israeli towns. At one point, the US and the United Nations brokered a 72-hour ceasefire, and the fighting between Israel and Hamas stopped, or at least it should have. 2 hours into the ceasefire, Hamas terrorists ambushed Hadar's unit, killing 2 fellow soldiers, shooting Hadar and dragging his body into a tunnel. Until this day, since 2014, Hamas has refused to return the body of Hadar along with 1 other soldier, as well as 2 civilians, bringing untold suffering for us, I think, inconceivable suffering for those who have not lived through this to the families. And joining us today to discuss this matter is the mother of Hadar Goldin, Dr. Leah Goldin. Since 2014, she has been actively working to recover her son's remains. Today is our opportunity to learn about Hadar and the most recent international efforts to return Hadar home. And I know that my predecessor, Michael Miller, has spent much time with Dr. Goldin and knows her well. And for JCRC, our concerns, of course, are in New York, and we are based here in New York. Our concerns are global, and Israel, and every citizen and every family in Israel is close to our heart, which is why today we wanted to share this program, to share the story, and to give you an opportunity to meet with Leah. So Leah, thank you very much for joining us today. It's really our honor to have you with us. Thank you very much. And maybe you can start by sharing with us a little bit about Hadar and his story.
Okay, Hadar was 23 years old when he was kidnapped and killed. And he left us with a wonderful legacy, written and art. Since 2016, we've been displaying his art exhibition in the United States. At the beginning, it was an exhibition at the UN during the General Assembly, and in parallel in Park Avenue Synagogue, and then Park East, and then it moved to California, to Los Angeles, to the Tolerance Museum and other places. Hadar had his own way to communicate with the world in writing and in drawings. And looking at his art pieces, you can understand how big was his soul, and his humanitarian attitude to the world. So I think that having his art pieces displayed gave us an opportunity to show the world what is actually the Israeli soldier, the IDF soldier, as a response to all those bad guys that try to think about the Israeli soldiers as bad guys. So this is Hadar, and along with his art, art pieces, he left us his remarks about the Mesilat Yesharim book of rights, how to be a better person. He wrote to himself how to improve himself, and after 3 years of hard work of my husband Simcha, we published the book in Hebrew, and a lot of Jewish people around the world are studying Mesilat Yesharim with Bechavruta im Hadar, with Hadar.
And I guess it's a difficult question. What do you think the direction for Hadar's life might have been had this not happened? Maybe it's the hardest question to ask, and I forgive me if it's not if it's a difficult. I'm sure it is a difficult question.
He was very. He loved everything. Whatever he touched, he did it with full heart and full, very professional. Whether it was science that he studied in school, or was it English when we spent in England a couple of sabbatical years, or art, or anything. People say he would probably become an educator. I don't know, or engineer. You know what? Maybe both. Maybe he would probably do more than one thing in his life. But unfortunately, in his 23 years, he managed a lot of things. And on a very personal saying, he almost never slept, since he was day one, having twins. Hadar is a twin brother, Hadar and Tzur, and you can watch them both, while Tzur is sleeping like a baby, for 8 hours. Hadar would sleep 2 hours and then watch with Simcha the football games,
I have a 24-year-old, and I know, I understand, I hear what you say, what you say on so much that has been done by someone of this age, and so much still to do, both. And we all feel for you, and it's I think every person watching, everyone who has been a child, we've all been children or had children. We understand, and the painting you draw of Hadar is one you bring him to us in a very vivid way. So I know it's hard, but take us back a little bit into what happened, and maybe you can just share with us as much as you feel comfortable with what happened and in that terrible time.
Yeah, actually on Sunday, it's August 1st, and it's 7 years, exactly 7 years. On August 1st, 2014, 2 hours after ceasefire was declared. As you said, Hamas ambushed his unit, but I would like to present what happened in my eyes, in our family's eyes, because to Gaza actually went, 2 of my boys went, the twin boys. Tzur and Hadar went to this war, Operation Protective Edge, and they entered Gaza as young officers. Tzur was commanding a rescue force. He was going back and forth to Gaza to rescue wounded and dead soldiers, Israeli soldiers, a lot of his friends. And he also rescued between 40 to 50 Palestinians that were caught between fire, as Hamas was using them as human shields. And at the same time, Hamas violated, Hadar was part of an elite unit, Givati, and their responsibility was to guard the engineering unit that had to destroy the underground terror tunnel. So 2 hours after ceasefire occurred, Hamas took advantage, knowing the IDF protocol during ceasefire not to shoot, and ambushed them and killed 3 of them, Bnaya Sarel, Leah Gidoni, and Hadar, probably. And of course, they abducted Hadar into the underground tunnel. Now, as Tzur says, while I was doing the most humanitarian thing to rescue Palestinians, the same people killed my brother, violating international and humanitarian ceasefire, and kidnapped him. And they still hold him, probably as a bargaining chip, you know, to trade sentenced terrorists. And if I may use Tzur wording, not just his wording, I mean, as a family, I think you can see the conflict, you know, having two of my sons doing humanitarian things while the Hamas is actually violating everything. And at the end of the story was that Tzur actually, as commanding the rescue force, got the call to rescue his brother. Of course, by the time he got there, he was not allowed to enter the tunnel, and he was sent back to the border, back to Israel. And since then, we are having our own war as a family to bring Hadar home from Gaza. I mean, this is our responsibility as Jewish people, as a Jewish family, as a mother. I mean, this is the basic Jewish value, to bring your son to decent burial, you know, according to Judaism. And same is with the Islam. Islam has the same thing, to bury their family before sunset. And this is actually the basis for the international humanitarian law, exactly on the same basis, religious basis, that capturing helpless people, probably Hadar was dead by that time, and preventing from the family to give his burial and human dignity, and you know, it's a list of like eight points that we had the chance. We had a special Security Council meeting on 2017, December 2017, where we actually came with Professor Erwin Kotler, previous Justice Minister of Canada and well-known human rights activist, a good Jew as well. And he actually built the legal framing of Hadar's case as being a humanitarian case, showing a humanitarian violation, international humanitarian law violation.
Mm-hmm. So what, maybe sort of share with us a little bit about what the efforts have been, in addition to this, what have the efforts been since 2014, and in what ways have you been able to advocate for this?
The first time after like 6 months that we came to the States, and by that time we met Michael Miller and Esther. Actually, we were hosted by Esther Fuchs and Dan Victor, and we actually feel like family with JCRC. What we learned is that Hadar is actually a victim of a ceasefire rather than a victim of a war.
Mm-hmm.
And since this ceasefire was brokered by the United States and the United Nations, supported by European Union, they should be responsibility for his return, same as they guaranteed the ceasefire. Now, this was, you know, a personal observation. But since then, we had this special Security Council in New York, UN Security Council, with the help of Nikki Haley, the US ambassador to the UN, and with the help with Professor Erwin Kotler, we realized that it's not just our personal view, it's the law. It's actually a standing violation of the international humanitarian law. Now, having that, we approached, actually we walked the world, but we went to the White House, we went to the State Department, to the Congress during 2017 to 18. And we got actually a positive response that this is wrong and should be rectified, you know. Now, however, you know, we are a family, we are not diplomats, we are not politicians, you know, and, you know, we managed to prove a point, but to take action, it's another step. And unfortunately, we had, before COVID-19, it was on June 2019, that there were a resolution that we learned of it by surprise. UN Security Council Resolution 2474 that states that wherever there is a conflict in the world, when the UN state members, the good countries, initiate agreements after the conflict, they are responsible to bring the missing persons and the remains of the dead as a confidence building measure to any agreement. It can be a commercial agreement, it can be a ceasefire agreement, and it can be a peace process agreement. And it was at the time where, you know, the previous administration was discussing the peace plan, you know, so it became very relevant to us that, again, we met with people, you know, Jason Greenblatt, with David Friedman here, because it was that at that point that we actually managed to convince your officials that it's their responsibility to put it on the agenda, you know, of the whole process that is happening in our region as a confidence building measure. However, COVID-19 entered to our lives, you know, and for, you know, almost 2 years, our life stopped. We didn't go to the States and we didn't fly, you know. And on June, last month, President Rivlin, actually I went with his delegation. I was hosted by President Rivlin in his trip to the United States. And this was a wonderful opportunity where with his help, because he was very clear in all the ceremonies he had, you know, at the UN and at the meeting with the General Secretary of the UN, Antonio Guterres, and when he walked to President Biden, he was very clear that now, especially now, after the last war, there is not going to be any reconstruction of Gaza unless they return Hadar, my son, Hadar Goldin, Oron Shaul, and other fallen soldiers, and the 2 civilians, Avera Mengistu and Hisham Sayed. And having him said it in loud and clear, actually opened the discussion for me to meet your wonderful ambassador to the UN, Linda Thomas Greenfield, which immediately said, this should be on top of our agenda in whatever we are doing or going to do now in Gaza. And there is a policy now to invest in Gaza. And actually this morning, she also made it clear, I mean, she made a statement at the Security Council regarding that thing that she's going to insist on the return of Hadar and Oron before anything happens to Gaza. And right after, I went to another 2 days to Washington, where I had a chance to meet your colleagues, Congressman Gregory Mix, and the other ranking chair, McCall, and Ted Deutsch, and Barbara Leaf, and other officials. And it was, I got such a positive response that we are now actually have a reflection of what we had in 2014. After the May last war, that we had another missile shootings all over Israel. Mm-hmm. And now we have America again was leading this ceasefire. And probably now there are discussions for those agreements after ceasefire. So this is our opportunity now, and to bring Hadar home in that specific window of opportunity. And mm-hmm. for that, I need your help to help me follow up. I feel that I did my best with the people I met, and I came home with a sentence I learned in the White House: humanitarian gesture for humanitarian gesture. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So this was for me, the best response I could get. But again, I'm a mother. I cannot do more than that, and I need Am Israel, Am Israel to do what Am Israel knows to do and help me bring Hadar home.
So tell us how do you think people, how can we help JCRC and people connected with JCRC? Tell us a little more specifically, just following up on what you've been doing. How do you think people can help?
I keep saying the stars are aligned. It's time for acting. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I've been using this sentence a lot since the last war, because the Biden administration, actually, these are almost the same people that were on 2014. It was John Kerry leading the ceasefire. President Biden was the vice president of Obama. Mm-hmm. So they understand the situation. And the new mm-hmm. thing is that now there is a policy of the Americans to invest in Gaza. So this is the time to clear the table and to rectify the violation of the previous ceasefire, where Hadar was kidnapped, because otherwise, where is the credibility of the ceasefire and where is the credibility of the Americans? So I need your people, JCRC and whoever else you can approach, actually to call to your representatives, the congressmen or whatever officials that can affect the decision making in our region, and just make sure they keep it on top of the agenda as a confidence building measure. Now, this is, and I said it when I met your officials, only America can do it, mm-hmm. because America did it in North Korea. Before meeting President Trump meeting the president of North Korea, he requested the return of hostages. They are doing the same now with the Iranians and in Afghanistan. And America has the leverage. Of course, there is no contact with terror, with Hamas, I understand that. But there are the Egyptians on one end, and there are the Qatars on the other end, and other countries around us that have leverage on Hamas, and the United States had leverage of those countries. So the stars are aligned. It's just, and the understanding is there. And if I may quote Hadar, in his writings on Mesilat Yesharim, he was very short. So he said, Havana, Ratzon, Yecholet. if you have understanding, will, capability. If you have the understanding and you want to and you have the will, then you can do it. You have the capability to do it. So I feel that understanding is there, you know, and capability is there to do it. Now, you know, the will to make it happen, you know. I don't know what's the English best word to say, ratzon, you know, to want to do it.
Desire, that's not the right word.
Yeah. And for that, I need you as American Jews, you know, because at the end of the day, it's the basic Jewish thing to bring your son to decent burial. And I need Am Israel to help me. So approaching your officials, wherever, and let them know that this is of interest for you to see it rectified, not just for Israel, for Am Israel and for the world, you know. We are no less than others, you know, and the fact that they are holding now our fallen soldiers, trying to use them as a bargaining chip, this is the most terrible thing, you know, capturing, abducting live hostages is something you can, okay, say it has a reason, but fallen soldier, this is the lowest humanitarian thing that can be done, immoral thing, and injustice. And I need your help to rectify.
Obviously, this is something that touches every Jewish soul, and not just a Jewish soul. This is something that's so deep in the human consciousness of a child and of someone who's passed away. Do you think the precedents of the other countries that you cite, you know, like as North Korea and so on, in your conversations, do people you've had with U.S. leaders and U.S. opinion makers, how have they reacted when you've made that comparison and that point? And is that something that you felt has hit a chord of using a precedent like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's well known. I mean,
yes.
we also met your special presidential envoy for hostages affair, Roger Carstens, and amazing. And for him, actually previously I met with Robert O'Brien that was holding this job. So I think that it's clear for them, you know, they both were officers in the US Army, you know, and this is the basic, not just humanitarian is the wider thing, but for people in army, you know, and what we actually suffer is, so the response was, yes, we should do it, but now, me being in Israel, I don't know what's happening, and I'm alerted that this window of opportunity is getting closed. So I need you, being closer to me where decisions are taken, to nudge them. I don't know how to do it. I mean, you are good in lobbying and whatever you do it, as I learned from Michael Miller. Now, there is also another thing that I learned from my son, Tzur, twin brother of Hadar, right after the war. What we suffer here is a bigger problem. It's the asymmetry of war between state to terror, you know, because all the laws, the laws of war and you know, all of those things were actually established for states, for countries, you know, since the Romans, you know. At the end of the war, you do exchange of prisoners of war and the fallen soldiers, you know, but fighting against terror, it's the asymmetry. They violate everything. They violated ceasefire, which is the the most important thing of laws of war. They violate everything. So what we have been experiencing here in Israel for the last 30 years, that they kidnap soldiers and actually use them as a bargaining chip. And you know, the slogan here in Israel is, oy, 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 ma mechir, oy, 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 what would be the cost? Cost, where everybody actually is referring to releasing sentenced terrorists from jail, like in Gilad Shalit, it was the worst, yeah, more than 1,000, and which is not going to be anymore. So Tzur, you know, at the beginning, you know, everyone around us, this is the slogan. So what are the alternatives? To give up? We don't give up, because my mother, which is a Holocaust survivor, she taught me and my brother and my kids that we don't have she always said, you don't have the privilege to give up.
Mm-hmm.
That's what she said, you know, said by a Holocaust survivor. It's very meaningful. So that's where I come in all my doings. And Tzur's idea was very simply said, it's about time to flip the equation. Instead of letting terror kidnap our soldiers and declare the price for us in order to release them, it's time that we define the cost for them for holding our soldiers and not returning them. So the next time they will think again before they plan any kidnap. Now, thinking that way actually bring us to the humanitarian discussion, because what terror does is always creating humanitarian crisis. Okay, and actually they are fighting a humanitarian war to us and to their own people. You know, whatever they get, they will destroy it, and then the whole world will kneel down and provide them a new humanitarian support. So here is where this UN resolution, Security Council resolution comes in, and actually this was resolution was led by the Kuwaits. The Kuwaits, they have a lot of missing persons in Iraq. So, hey, we have a common ground, you know? We have a common ground with Arabs. Let's fight to bring our boys home. And I think that by doing that, it will be like a paradigm shift. It will be like a paradigm shift in how to treat them. And it's a matter of attitude, not just to give terror and expect them to behave. But what they do is just provide false promises, because they are terrorists. But they cannot survive one day without the international community support. So now it's the time to say, okay, this does not cost any money. Okay, it's not an energy station or any buildings. It's a matter of value. It's a moral issue. It's a moral duty. And actually, this was the wording that I was using with your officials as a mother, you know, not very diplomatic. I said to those your officials, this is your moral duty for me to bring my son home before you establish another ceasefire agreement. But I believe that your people really think seriously of laws, you know, especially the international laws. I don't have to convince them. I felt that I just had to bring the case, you know.
You know, it's tell me a little bit in Israel how, I mean, the issue of obviously of prisoners and of people fallen in combat is such a deep issue. Is this still as deep an issue as it was? I remember, you know, when I spent a year in Israel when my 24-year-old was in Kita Zayin, and at the time of Gilad Shalit, and the impression, even in that 1 year, that it made on her, the tent outside, that this was a matter of national concern, was something that even today she still talks about as something of the impact she felt as a youngster in the society. And I think it's something that certainly in the Jewish world it's felt. Is it felt in Israel, do you think, deeply, as deeply as it has been? Is that a struggle to keep it as a priority in the public mind in Israel?
So here is our frustration. What you remember very well is the time that everyone was campaigning, but somehow it just flipped on our head. I don't know the right, התהפך עלינו, you know? You know, it became a trauma. It became trauma because since then we had all those intifada, you know, and people claimed that those terrorists that were released came back and was acting and in killing, which is not so right, you know, but it was then used as political argument. So all in all, today, it's very frustrating. Those people that were holding the torch for Gilad Shalit will now actually blame everyone that tried to act in a similar way. So this is not the atmosphere anymore. And to add on this, you know, all the political situation in Israel during the last 4 years, having four elections, you know, this is not normal in any way. So we are stuck. And, you know, in order to be politically correct, and since, you know, whenever I talk outside Israel, I'm trying to be more diplomatic, I would say that Israel is part of the problem. America is part of the solution. That's why America has leverage on Israel in resolving it. And in our case, Hadar was killed in a ceasefire that America broke it, US broke it. So it's a direct responsibility. It's a moral responsibility. And not just moral, it's also a law, international law responsibility. Now, the challenge is how to implement it as a confidence building measure. Now, a confidence building measure, as I said to your officials, in any agreement, there are a lot of guarantees that are put on the agenda. I count on those professionals that would know how to put this as another guarantee for that agreement. They probably know better than me.
Okay, so it's, look, I think it's your story and the story of Hadar. It's so many different stories. It's first and foremost a personal and emotional one for you, and I think by extension to anyone who cares. It's a legal issue. It's a political issue. It's a military issue. It's so many different issues that are all wrapped into one. And I think certainly for the concern that you've found in the past in JCRC is certainly there. And for the New York Jewish community, this is certainly an issue that we know. It's certainly close to our hearts, and we will do everything we can to try to bring this to take, you know, there is a voice. There's no voice more eloquent than yours, and you speak from the heart. And what hopefully we can do is help to amplify it and to give it a megaphone. And you've talked directly to people, but we will try to amplify it to those same people and to others who can affect this. And I think you're right. It's a moment in time when the stars, not every stars line up, but there's certainly some stars lined up. And you have friends, I know, deep friends in New York, in JCRC, and in the community in New York. And this will be this will be part of our mandate and part of our work. And as I come into this new position, it's certainly one that I will also take on and keep bringing to the table. So I want to thank you for sharing this. I know you do it many times, and every time I'm sure it's equally hard and difficult. Even many years later, it doesn't change, I'm sure. And really, our thoughts are with you, and we hear you, and we will not give up. We will not give up.
Thank you. Toda rabba.
I wish you well. Goodbye. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you. And thank you everyone for joining us, and those of you watching on Facebook, and we'll continue to update you on further JCRC webinars on this and related subjects. So thank you very much, Leah. All the best. Bye.